Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Audit and Risk Management Determination Subcommittee. Welcome also to those members of the public and press accessing the meeting via the live stream to YouTube. I'm Councillor Maureen Davis and I'm chairing today's meeting. Minutes will be produced in the usual way and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time as the minutes are produced. I'd like to remind members and officers that audio from the microphones will be captured on live stream. Therefore, when speaking, please ensure your microphones are switched on and switch them off when you have finished speaking. Please ensure that mobile phones are on silent or turned off. I will begin with agenda item number 1 and call on member services to report any apologies for absence, please.
Yes, we've had no apologies.
Agenda item 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes on pages 3 to 6 of the agenda pack from the meeting of 4th of October 2022 as being a correct record of that part of the meeting which took place in public. Do I have a proposer, please? And a seconder? No, using, yeah. Does any member have any comments to make on the minutes? No, can I have a show of hands then to approve those minutes? Thank you. Right, agenda item 3 is to report additional items for consideration which the chairman deems urgent by virtue of special circumstances now specified. There are none. Agenda item number 4 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, can you raise your hand? No hands raised, thank you. In respect of agenda item 5, I'll now pass over to Phil Hughes, Head of Leisure and Open Spaces, to present the Cemeteries Apprentice Cemeteries Coordinator report. He will also be able to provide responses to any service-specific questions that the committee might have. Over to you, Phil. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chairman. So members have the report in front of them. It's really about adding capacity to a very small team that manages the open spaces and specifically the cemeteries and bereavement aspect of the work the council does. So the council manages 5 open cemeteries where interment bashes and coffins are still underway, and 18 closed cemeteries as well, which are predominantly churchyards where the cemeteries are full. Burials aren't underway at the moment, but we have to maintain those as well. Recently, we've appointed an independent consultant to look into the way we manage bereavement and the operational side of the cemetery's work. And the feedback from that person has said we are under-resourced and there are many things we ought to be doing that we're not doing at the moment. So we're running a service that's doing a pretty good job, but in the last year there have been some issues. And, you know, in discussion with memorial masons and with funeral directors, they've said the service we would expect looks different elsewhere than it does in Fenland. So, for instance, when an interment's being undertaken, there would be a council officer present elsewhere. There isn't in Fenland. There isn't any work together with the memorial masons or the funeral directors to see how we can work together better, because we just don't have the capacity to manage that at the moment. So I think at the back of the report, you'll see a long list of responsibilities that this new role would undertake. So that would include being on site during burials, working with memorial masons, working with the undertakers, assessing grounds maintenance work as well, working with the builders who do capital works. For instance, at the moment, we've got 3 chapels that are being made safer, and that's about £150,000 worth of work. We've just had Doddington churchyard wall repointed at quite a cost again. These are all jobs that the small team at the moment don't have the capacity to manage and monitor. On top of that, then, the liaison between the bereavement team in the back office who are managing the administration of bereavement and the operational side, they would do that work as well. They'd look into heritage in cemeteries, 'cause we've got a lot of heritage assets that we're not showing off, if you like, or enhancing at the moment, whether that be just highlighting to the community that certain people are buried in a certain cemetery, or working with someone like the National Lottery Heritage Fund to enhance what exists in Fenland for the community. And finally, war memorials as well. So we have war memorials in our cemeteries, and you know, we're not highlighting the fact that they're in there. I think we can do a lot more with the cemeteries we've got. With the capacity we have in the team at the moment, we can't do that. So the real reason for this role is to mitigate the risk to the council of burial failures, of which we've had a couple in the last year, but there's a lot more around the role that will enhance what's happening in our cemeteries. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I welcome this. I think it should have been done years ago. I'm certainly know of a case, a very unfortunate, distressing case last summer, and having spoken to various undertakers, they're obviously not pleased with the service they're having at this time. And what was pointed out to me even last week, there is nobody there when burials are taking place, and the undertaker said we could put anything in there. You don't know, which is actually quite concerning. So I do welcome this. I'm not convinced one additional person is sufficient, but it's a start.
Yes, ideally. So at the moment there isn't. So the grave diggers who work on our behalf through our contract with Tivoli, they're present, obviously away from the grave, but their job is to prepare the plot for burial. Whereas this officer would be there to make sure everything's set up in advance, to liaise with the funeral director if there were any issues. Whereas at the moment that doesn't exist. So Councillor French mentioned an issue last year, and we had our consultant talk directly to that undertaker because, you know, they had a very unfortunate situation. You know, obviously it impacted the family considerably, and the consultant hearing directly from the funeral director who was present was really helpful. And the chap calls a spade, quite frankly, and says, you know, we need to do better. And that's why I'm here.
Can you just enlighten me then? Is this just cemeteries managed by Fenland as opposed to parish council cemeteries, for example?
It's just FDC cemeteries. So the 18 closed cemeteries, they're pretty much, they belong to the church. But the law is that once the cemetery's full, the church can pass it to the parish and then the district for us to maintain. But yeah, where burials are underway, it would only be in our cemeteries.
Right, I understand that, but for example, in Wimbledon, we've got a closed cemetery, which you now look after,
Right.
but we've also got the cemetery that we're using. And so you're saying we don't have to have a council officer present at those burials?
That wouldn't be our responsibility because the council's not involved in the burial process there.
But what you're saying is technically we should.
Saying the advice we've had from our consultant is that we should have a member of staff there, making sure that the procedure goes very smoothly. And because we've had some issues recently, I think their advice is probably spot on.
So in our circumstances, we could say the clerk would always have to be there, for example.
Potentially.
Okay, thank you. Bob first, then.
Just for clarification, how many, shall we say, active cemeteries does Fenland actually look after?
It's 5.
Oh.
So it's 5, and we don't have interments going on at the same time in different cemeteries. It's one at a time. So we tend to have 2 slots per day, 5 days a week. Yeah, St Wendreda's old one is one of Fenland's to look after. Yeah, we'll look into that.
Councillor Bennett.
Me and Phil, we have met in Chatteris Cemetery many times when it's, and some of the work you've done. We met there several years ago, and you told me then that Fenland had spent £20,000 or was going to spend £20,000 that year just tidying it up. And the amount of money that we're spending on these, knowing that you'd spent the money, I could see where you'd been. But these plants and trees that we cut back grow at a faster rate than the money does to keep them in good order. Now, I know where we are going to end up with this as councillors if we take this chap on and he is looking at the trees in the churchyard and he's taking down and looking at the brambles. When I come to you as a councillor and say that Meek Cemetery in Chatteris is an absolute mess, what are we doing to put it right? The answer I get back is we ain't got any money to do anything with it. We're going to tinker with it. Now, if we're going to employ somebody who's going to go around and write reports that says this tree needs cutting down, that tree needs doing, and tree work's very expensive to do, are we setting ourselves up to fail? Because we're not going to be able to deliver on doing the work that this person is going to say we're going to need. Now, where does that go? Because as a councillor, I'm concerned of where having somebody that is going to come along and look at these cemeteries. And I've been around I've been in New Road Cemetery, the current one, and I've also been around Meeksy Cemetery as well. And I know there's been work done in there, but all these trees keep growing it, and it's never going to stop. And this is going to create a bigger problem later on for us as councillors when you come back to us with the reports and say, this new chart has found that we need to spend £200,000-300,000 on the cemeteries in Fenland. Where does that one sit?
Yeah, we've had the cemeteries assessed actually recently, and that's informed the work we're doing on the chapels at the moment. Work we are doing on the chapels is health and safety work and essential maintenance. So we're not bringing them back to, you know, the condition they were decades ago. It's all about just maintaining the asset. But in terms of trees, you're right. They will continue to grow. We do have a responsibility to make sure that our open spaces are safe for residents. I think last time we were at this committee, I talked about a tree officer. So we're trying to appoint a tree officer at the moment. So this person won't be qualified to look at a tree and say, oh, that needs some work. It's another person's job. We're working on that at the moment. And you're right, it will cost money. We don't have a choice but to maintain trees. If they're not safe, we might injure someone, and we can't put the council in that position or the community.
I appreciate the problem with trees, that they keep growing, and we've got to be safe. I mean, other councils have a policy that if they have trees that are unsafe, cut them down. Now that solves it growing and solves a problem for the future, because this is very expensive. I mean, I've walked around. My father had a brother that died as a child, and his grave is in the current New Road Cemetery. And I've walked around there several times to try and find that grave, and I can't find it because it's so overgrown. But when I've spoke to you about clearing, we really only concentrate on the active parts of it, and we tinker with the extremities. You know, there's a lot of money going to be spent on looking after this. Are we going to end up with a proactive approach to this, which solves the problem rather than tinkers with it? Because you say we're doing the buildings up, the cemeteries in these buildings. All we are doing is bringing them back to a standard of minimum health and safety levels to keep them safe. We're not restoring these buildings to their former glory that they were when they were built. We're putting a plaster on things yet again because we're reactive rather than proactive. And I support this. You know, we don't want it where graves are falling in. You know, if the recommendation is that we need somebody to be there when burials are there, that's fine. I've got no problem with that. But I can just see, I'm very conscious that empires get built at times, and we take somebody on to do this, and they will be looking for work that then you'll be coming back to us as councillors, and you'll want us to find money from somewhere to put this right. You know, that is my biggest concern. And I dare say the money that you've spent on these cemeteries or on the buildings, this is just to bring it up to basic health and safety levels and to stop fixing the slates and putting that. And that is not, you know, some of these are listed buildings and the cost of doing that work is not cheap. And I can see this creating a problem further down the line.
Yeah, I think we are where we are with the chapel, certainly. You know, there are buildings to maintain. So we are bringing them up, as you said, to health and safety standard, not enhancing them back to their former glory. In terms of this role, they would also liaise with and hopefully develop more friends groups to work within the cemetery. So we have a small group in Whittlesea who've been doing that for a while. And Station Road Cemetery, just over there, in fact, magnificent cemetery in March, lovely, lovely open space. We have a small friends group working there, but we also have the probation team working in there regularly as well. So this new role would hopefully support the emergence of stronger or more friends groups, as well as that link with the probation team to do things like the work in Meeks Cemetery, which is, you know, it's brambles, isn't it? Taking on the world. And that takes some time and costs a lot of money. Yeah.
Councillor French.
Thank you. I do agree with partly what Councillor Benny says, but this is a service that we have not provided properly for years. We've now got the opportunity. As I said earlier, I don't believe one person is enough, but at least we've got the opportunity. I think it is important that we do have somebody. If Phil's saying there's about 10 burials a week, and this person would be in attendance, so that is quite a big chunk of the work. So I don't look at it slightly the way that Councillor Benny is about trees. We need a proper tree officer, and I know you've got problems trying to get one. So I do welcome this, but I would also like to look at this in a year's time to see how it's worked, and do we actually need another body?
I just wanted to make an observation, really. Seems quite a wide role, and in some cases, quite important things being worked on by an apprentice.
Yeah, the term apprentice is a bit strange, isn't it? You could be a senior manager and do some kind of apprentice training. So it has got apprentice in there because they would get time off to do some training, and we'd use our apprenticeship levy to fund that as well. So yeah, the word apprentice sounds like you're dumbing it down, but not necessarily.
And so they actually ultimately report to yourself,
They'd report to the contract manager.
to the contract. Councillor Benny.
It may seem like I'm being a bit down on this. I'm not. You know, I fully support the proposal in front of it. I don't see any option we've got to do this, but I think there's things that we do need to look at. I mean, if we're providing this service of putting somebody on site for every burial, could that not be charged back to the funeral director for the cost of having that person there to recoup some of this cost? Because I don't see why we should have to pick this up. That could be something that the funeral director, if we have to have them there, then so should the funeral director. And why shouldn't the funeral director have to pay this cost for an attendance?
Well, we could consider that in the future as part of our fees and charges work, couldn't we? Yeah.
Councillor Meekins.
Well, on that same point, is it actually a legal requirement to have someone from the district council at every interment? Because if it's not, why are we saying we have to have someone at every interment if it's not a legal requirement?
So it's not a legal requirement. If it was, we would have had someone doing that in the past. It's best practice. It's what the funeral directors would expect to see. It mitigates the risk of something going wrong during a funeral. You can imagine if there is an error, it's incredibly upsetting for the family present. It's also very, very difficult for the funeral director, and it means an inordinate amount of time spent by officers at Fenland fixing the problem, coordinating with the family. So this is best practice. It's what our consultant recommends, and it's certainly what the undertakers in Finland are expecting to see but aren't getting at the moment. So we're providing a service. The service probably isn't at the standard that you'd expect.
Would not the funeral director, shouldn't they be responsible for the running of the funeral? And that should include them, I believe, ensuring that the hole's been dug beforehand, ensuring that it's been dug to the right length, the depth, and then they should rock up and turn up and do everything else. Why is it that council should get involved at that stage?
We actually contract the people to actually dig the graves out, so it is a council responsibility. Always has been.
Councillor Benny?
Yeah, in planning, we have building control. We sub that work out to Kings and West Norfolk for Fenland. And they come and do the inspections. Why can't the funeral directors put that in there within their workload to ensure? I think you're absolutely right. I think that the funeral directors should be responsible for this. They should certainly be checking it. And if it's not done, I accept that we pay for we have the contractors that do the digging, but they're the one that providing the service to the bereaved. You'd think for making their job run properly that they would want to ensure that it's all done properly, and that should be part of their checks to make sure that the day runs as smoothly as a funeral can.
Yeah, I can assure you, it's the funeral director who arranges for the grave to be dug at our cemetery. So why does that not extend to other cemeteries? Councillor Bench?
I don't disagree with what you've said, but we are where we are. We're looking at the paper in front of us. As you know, we look at planning, what's in front of you. It's not in front of you about charging. I think if you want to do that, you have to go further down the line, bring it back to us once a consultant, have a word with a consultant, get their advice and their input from, and if then the advice is to put the charge onto the undertakers, so be it. But that's not what's in front of us today.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for Phil? No? Right, I jumped too quickly when I introduced Phil. I should have first asked for a proposer for the report and a seconder for the report. So if we could just do that to keep things formal, thank you. And then if there's no further questions, I'm asking the Audit and Risk Management Determination Subcommittee to note the report and to agree to the addition of an apprentice cemeteries coordinator to the council's establishment in order to reduce the significant reputational risk of burial failures alongside other significant cemetery operational work. Please, can you raise your hand if you disagree?
Can we add something to that?
I think I was going to do the same as you. 12 months.
But in between time, also look at the possibility after consultation with the consultant on the possibility of charging. So if we can have that in the report as well, please.
Yeah, have you got that? Yeah, that's fine. Got that. So raise your hand then if you disagree with the report with the extra annotations put in by committee members. Okay. I take it then that we all agree. Thank you. Thank you. In relation to the remaining agenda item, members are asked to determine whether they contain information considered in accordance with paragraph 1 of Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972. We're asking should be exempt and the press and public be excluded from the meeting, or whether the public interest in disclosing this information outweighs the public interest in maintaining the exemption. Can I ask any member who does not agree with the proposal to exclude the press and public for the discussion of the report to raise their hand now? Thank you. Members are in agreement. Therefore, member services, please, can you stop the link to you, Chair?